reflecting our broad political scope. It's Natalie Bennett, former leader of the Green Party.
Well, thank you very much, and it's lovely to be back at the People's Assembly with a new title, former leader of the Green Party. Now, of course, everyone keeps asking me, so what are you going to be doing now? Well, the short answer is full-time politics, just like I was doing before. The second half of that sentence I have been saying, but at a slightly more reasonable pace. I think that might be a little bit of a politician's fib, actually. I think the raw, reasonable pace, there's so much to do, there's so many opportunities, I'm just going to keep going every day, every hour that I possibly can, because this is a time of great opportunity, and that's something to really focus on. Now, what I'm going to do is something really, really unconventional for the People's Assembly. I'm going to start by quoting two Tory MPs. And I'm going to agree with them. Hang in with me here. The first one I'm going to quote is Anna Soubry. Now, I've done a question time with Anna Soubry, and she's not somebody who I would usually expect to agree with very often. But just a couple of days ago, she said, referring to a Liam Fox speech on Brexit, that the entire speech was delusional. And I agree with Anna Soubry. She said, it's really worrying that we've got Liam Fox, Boris Johnson and David Davis deciding the future of our country. I agree with Anna Soubry. And there's another Tory MP I'm going to agree with also, and that's Ken Clarke. He said of the Tory government, nobody knows what they're doing. He was talking specifically about Brexit, but I think he really covered the whole territory. Now, I said that, all of that, not for effect, or just for effect anyway, but because I think there's a really important point that's really been lost in the focus on the Labour Party, and I hope in the coming days we're going to see a focus on the Tory Party, and focus on a party that's in absolute disarray. The fact is, Theresa May has actually inherited a poisoned chalice. She has inherited a party that is in chaos. She's inherited a government that's in chaos. She's inherited a whole state of broken politics. And she's not going to be able to fix it. We know she won't. Now, I'm afraid I haven't been able to be here all of today, so I rather suspect some other speakers might have commented on this. But I do have to comment on the banner to my left over here. Yes. Cameron must go. Now, I do think, Sam, it's about time for the People's Assembly to update that. but I have a suggestion, because, I don't think Theresa May is going to be around for very long. So what you could do is get a bit of white sheet and just sew it over the top. And so then you can recycle. I'm a green, I believe in recycling. Recycle that. And then when Theresa May is gone, we can recycle it again. So that sound like a plan, Sam? Okay, all right. So, what we've got is a huge job and a huge opportunity for all of us. The job is that we need to keep not just highlighting the fact that we have a rundown nation, a nation that's been run down by austerity, but offer solutions. When we look at the state of the nation, the libraries, so many closed, still closing. The parks, something that I saw some figures on today. Our whole parks, the absolute centre of our communities, central to people's lives, central particularly to the lives of people who don't have their own private gardens. They're being run down, neglected, sold off. In Liverpool, for example, sold off for private developments, for executive housing. We've got the fact that we've got our NHS being privatised. We've got child poverty rising, some figures out today. The earlier session that I've just caught the end of, talking about the state of our schools and the chaos caused by Govian policies that are still continuing. And one of my pet things is, there's been some figures out recently and the government's been applauding how much the arts and cultural industries are generating for the British economy. At the same time, as they're entirely slashing away all of the arts and cultural education in our schools and the funding for arts and culture in our communities. Where's the next generation going to come from? We've got student debt just rising and rising. And Ken made reference to the doctors, the junior doctors, who've been fighting such a brave fight trying to defend our NHS, but I want to focus also on the student nurses. Because there really is a hugely important point to be made there. This is a new low in austerity. Student nurses, midwives and other associated health professionals, they do thousands of hours of work in the NHS as part of their training. They're now being asked to pay to work. That is an absolute new low of austerity. We've got to make sure everyone knows about it. Now the fact is, of course, it's very clear that the Tories are losing the argument. And they are actually pulling back on some things. Ken referred to the announcement that came earlier today about the work capability assessment. And I entirely agree with Ken that, of course, it's going to be limited, it won't be as good as it sounds. And of course, what they should do, very clearly, is not limit the work capability assessment. What they should do is abolish the work capability assessment. You know, I don't think it's because the Tories have suddenly discovered a little bit of heart that they're doing what they're doing. They're doing that because they've been forced to, because their policy has failed. The public realises their policy is failing. That drip, drip, drip of stories of individuals after individuals who've suffered enormously under the system, the sad, tragic numbers of people who've committed suicide after being abused and tortured by the system. They've had an impact. And the Tories are giving way on this not because they've got a heart, but because public opinion is heading in our direction. And everyone who's campaigned, well done. But there's a much broader issue here, because it's clear, if you want to call it neoliberalism, you call it neo-Thatcherism, call it what you like, it's failed. It's not working anymore, even in its own terms. And there's a story today in the Financial Times, another unexpected source perhaps, but the Financial Times talking about how economics courses in universities are changing because the students have demanded that they change. The Rethinking Economics movement, students have said, we're looking at what we're being taught in our lecture theatres and we know it's nonsense. Teach us something else. They, the neoliberals, the neo-Thatcherites, they're losing the argument. But that doesn't mean we can sit back, relax. It means we've got a job to keep highlighting where they're wrong, how they're failing. But we've also got a huge job, and I think that the title of this session focuses on this really well. We also really need to be presenting the positive alternatives. What we have to be doing is offering people hope and a vision of what the future can look like. And I don't know how many people in this hall are creatives, perhaps filmmakers, artists, photographers, whatever. But if you are, or if you know anyone who is, please take to them a challenge, because it's a challenge for all of us as campaigners, but it's a challenge that needs to be much broader. We need to paint a picture of a functional, environmentally sensitive society that works for all, a future society, a post-neoliberal society. There's a lot of zombie movies. There's a lot of post-apocalypse novels. I want to see many more pictures created of a society where it's all worked out, where everything we've been working for has succeeded, and here's the picture of what it looks like. And I'm not talking, Ken makes brilliant political films, but I'm not necessarily talking about straight political films here. I'm talking about perhaps a Hollywood rom-com. Boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back again. And just in the background, put your own favourite famous actors in there, but in the background, it's all powered by renewable energy, everyone's got a living wage, there's a universal basic income, it's all worked out fine. That's what we need to do, is create those pictures for people, paint those pictures. And of course, we actually know what quite a lot of it already looks like. We've got lots of the tools, the mechanisms, the political acts are there, we just need to implement them. So, one of the things that I try and include in every speech that I give on any subject at all is the fact that we have a government currently that won the backing of this 24% of eligible voters. That's how many people backed the Tories. We do not have a democracy. And so what we need, we know what we need fair votes, we need a voting system where you vote for what you believe in and get it. And putting that to people, explaining, I had a debate on Twitter today, when you get that old argument, but you had the chance in 2011, there was a referendum then. It's very simple. The hashtag is AV is not PR. And then you think about the NHS. And when you look at the NHS and the way the Tories are privatising it, ripping the heart out of it, slashing away the funding that it needs. And there's another figure here. I said 24% of eligible voters. Another figure to remember is George Osborne's plans, which I suspect will still be Theresa May's plans, are for NHS spending to be 6.6% of GDP by 2020. 6.6%. Now, France and Germany spend about 11% of GDP on healthcare, nearly double. So, we know what we need to do for the NHS. We need to, as a starting point, lift spending back to the levels, OECD levels, as a starting point. And that would make a big difference to our NHS, and it would mean that we could actually pay our workers in the NHS properly, which we're not doing at the moment. But more than that, of course, what do we do about the organisation of the NHS? Well, there is, sitting there, been around Parliament a couple of times and it'll keep coming back, the NHS Reinstatement Bill. That sets out two principles. One, that the profit motive has no place in our NHS. Two, that we take away the market mechanism. We don't have the purchaser-provider split. We don't make it act like the private sector even when it's not the private sector. And if we do those two things, we bring in the NHS Reinstatement Bill, we've taken a big step towards the post-neoliberal society. So the recipe, the prescription is there. We know what we need to do. What we need to do is deliver on it. So we've got a big job. For more areas of policy, more areas of society to say what we need to do. And we need to paint a picture of a society that works. We need to offer hope. And I think I'm just going to finally, I can see the chair looking at me now, it's all right, I've got your chair. Because Ken finished with immigration, I want to finish on that area too, because I think it is really so very important if we're not to, let's see, the UKIP tendency. The UKIP tendency that I'm afraid exists in pretty well all parties in Britain. If we're not to see that UKIP tendency winning, we need to absolutely lay the blame for many of society's problems. Low wages, crowded schools and hospitals, housing cost, lack of council houses. Lay the blame where it belongs. These are not caused by immigration, they're caused by failed government policies. Now, during the referendum, I had an interesting discussion on Camden High Street with a builder. And it turned out that he'd already postal voted, so I really shouldn't have been talking to him, but it was an interesting discussion, so I kept going. And I said to him, you know, he said that he voted for Brexit, and I said, why? And he said, well, it's because my wage, my salary hasn't gone up in pound terms in 10 years. And I said, absolutely right for you to complain about that. Why do you blame Brussels or the European Union for that? And he said, oh, well, it's immigration, you know, I work with all these Eastern European people. And I said, don't you think they'd like higher wages? Don't you think they're not one walking in and saying, oh, I want to work for less money? Yeah, sure. I really want to struggle to survive in London on, you know, £10 an hour or £8 an hour? Of course they're not. It was at the time when Philip Green, remember him? Yeah. Was right in the headlines. And I said to him, you know that company profits have been going up, that wage share, the amount of percentage of GDP going into wages has been falling off a cliff for the past 3 decades or so. The person you should be blaming as a representative for your low wages, the fact your wages haven't risen, is not your Eastern European work colleague, it's Philip Green and his ilk. And he kind of went, yeah. Yeah. We've all got to have lots and lots of conversations like that. We've got to confront when people say immigration, low wages, crowded schools and hospitals. Say to them, all of those are perfectly reasonable concerns, but they are not caused by immigration. They are caused by failed government policies. What we need to do is get rid of the Tories, change the government, change our policies, build a new Britain, invest in the future. That's the way we need to go. And so many people are doing this. Today we're here in Birmingham. Down in London, they've got big protest, staying grounded, lots of lively things happening at Heathrow and Gatwick. Today marks the start of Black History Month. We can look to the past for lots of ideas and inspiration. But what we've really got to do is build for the future, build something new and different. Because I've been focusing on hope, but we've got to acknowledge we are absolutely at a crisis point on this planet. Climate change, plastics in our oceans, the state of our soils are absolutely a crisis point. But that, while it's a threat, is also an opportunity, because we have to build something entirely different, entirely new. And we can learn from the past, learn from those who've gone before us, but it's in our hands to build something new and much better. That's what we can do, and what we have to do. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Natalie. Our next speaker.